give her praise because she
fleecy
deserves it.
It's fleecy on the inside.
And
I'll even show myself on camera.
All right,
and
Outlaw Radio. We're back after this.
Why you say that? That's weird.
Greed, deception, abuse of power, that's no plan. I'm the enemy. Because I like to think. I like to read. I'm into freedom of speech and freedom of choice. I'm the kind of guy who likes to sit in a greasy spoon and wonder, gee, should I have the T-bone steak or the jumbo rack of barbecue ribs with the side order of gravy fries? I want high cholesterol. I want to eat bacon and butter and buckets of cheese, okay? I want to smoke a Cuban cigar the size of Cincinnati in the non-smoking section. I want to run through the streets naked with green jello all over my body reading Playboy magazine. Why? Because I suddenly might feel the need to, okay, pal? I've seen the future. You know what it is? It's a 47-year-old virgin sitting around in his beige pajamas drinking a banana broccoli shake singing, I'm an Oscar Mayer weed.
You're listening to the Outlaw Radio Network. OutlawRadioNetwork.com.
All right, thank you for checking out the Outlaw Radio Network. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining the show. We'll do a quick intro around the table. Ladies and gentlemen, to my left, a broadcast partner of mine for the better part of the last 20-plus years. He is St. Paul, the voice of reason. Hello, Paul.
Kevin, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I truly appreciate it. All the years we've been on air together, I never get tired of hearing you praise me. It's a wonderful thing. To my
I do what I can.
To my direct left is Black Tom. Tom, my friend, my brother, Mr. Chrome Dome himself. I truly appreciate you. And boy, do you... what would the right word? You are our local distiller. What is like the descriptive word for Tom? Like a distiller.
Man.
What is a descriptive word for a distiller?
A descriptive word for a distiller?
Would it be like stiller? Are you a stiller?
No.
He's a distiller, right?
You know, my official job title for my company is master distiller.
Okay,
there we go.
But
we'll call you master distiller. I dig it.
Okay,
I dig it. It's, I'm not going to call you. I mean, what do they call moonshiners? Like shiners?
Well, so I'm
felons.
Yeah.
By the way, you can find Tom at Black Ring Spirits.
That is how I got started.
Yes.
But, no, I mean, really, the idea of master distiller, the only reason you get to say that is because you're the person that is in charge of making all the decisions on grain bills and barrel styles and times and everything. Otherwise, a distiller's a moonshiner's a moonshiner. You know.
All right, for everybody listening, we're not talking about alcohol and brewing.
No,
for the
we're
next
not.
hour, so just settle down. If you're like, what is this, like an alcohol?
Yep.
It's not. It just spills over.
No pun intended.
Don't spill. That's a party foul.
DJD is our engineer extraordinaire running the show. Hello, Dennis. Thank you for all you do. And nobody ever introduces me. I always get forgetting.
Well, I would like to go back and just flip it over to you to the left, but we kind of go in this weird circle.
We do. So I'm K-Dog. I'm Kevin, and I really am the constitutional scholar who makes the show go. So I want to welcome everybody on Mega Talk Radio. Also want to welcome our audience listening to us on WWWE in Atlanta. Hello, Hotlanta. We love you already. We don't even know you yet. We're going to open with a conversation that is ongoing and has been part of the national discussion for the better part of what, Paul? 5-6 years now,
think so.
If not longer.
I think 5 to 7 years. I think that this I don't maybe since that's about the right time. Since about the time Trump was elected, I think is when it really started.
Yeah.
And now through Biden's presidency. And I don't think there's an easy way to really set this conversation up, right? Because it's emotional for a lot of people one way or another. No, we're not talking about the Supreme Court decision that tossed Roe back to the states.
I'm sure we'll have that shortly.
Yeah, that'll definitely come up. That'll definitely come up. What we wanted to take a moment and talk about is how we as individuals, I guess, would the right word be, Kevin, perceive law enforcement, identify with law enforcement, the job that they're doing. coexist.
Mhm.
The job that they are doing, and what does it mean to us? Do we think that they should be doing a better job? We saw what happened in Uvalde. We saw police hanging back and not going right, and for different reasons, while some of them tried to. Their jobs have gotten considerably harder in the last 5 to 7 years, and I mean considerably. They've been intentionally targeted and shot at by mass shooters in large public areas. I'm thinking about the shooter down in was it Dallas?
Yeah.
Who shot 7 or 8 police officers that night. A lot is expected of them and always has been, but now it's almost as if more is expected of them and less is accepted of them.
Mhm.
So that the more they do, the more they're hated, the more they're reviled. And we thought it would be a good conversation between us here in studio to have, because I think there's a lot of different aspects to this conversation.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge, Paul, and you alluded to it, right? We now expect more and are willing to give less grace to those in law enforcement specifically. There is, you mentioned Uvalde, right?
Mhm.
And obviously this has been talked about a lot. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the issue with Uvalde was, as the gunman went through the school, as the gunman killed 19 kids and 2 teachers, police stood back and chose not to go in. I learned, so I don't know if you're aware of this, Paul. I did some research this week,
Whoa.
which, as you listen to this show, you realize I never did research. I did research this week. Did you know that the Uvalde School District has their own police department?
Correct.
They have, so this isn't like many of the and we're on the West Coast for those of you that are in Atlanta. And out here, usually the local police departments will put a school resource officer in,
Right.
So that they'll take an officer from their department and they'll station him in the school to build relationships and handle issues as they arise. But it's really about building relationships. In Uvalde, they had their own police force, which consisted of a chief of police and 4 officers. And their sole job was to serve as officers within the school district.
Mhm.
Now, they were paid garbage wages. And I don't think we can separate, I can't separate the difference between asking officers to place their lives on the line in a place like Uvalde, where the dude's got a gun and he's shooting randomly, and we're asking them to put their lives on the line when we're going to pay them garbage wages. I don't think you can divide the two, right? And so I'm not excusing the officers for not going in. I'm merely suggesting, if you're going to ask people to put their lives on the line for your children, then you'd better pay them like your kids' lives depend on it, because they do.
So here's the fallacy I find in that argument. I'm not really disagreeing with you, but soldiers do it for a lot less. And so if we know in life, when we are called to a profession, whatever that is, there's a reason we're called to it, right? I mean, if you have just a job, right, you're usually just over broke. A career is just a job that's lasted too long. But if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people in law enforcement are called to it. Some of them because they found a way to still be a bully, right? Some of them because they felt an absolute need and desire to serve their community. I think pay, and the pay raising and going up, comes with time in service and doing the job and getting better at the job, right? I was incredibly confused by what we saw unfold in Uvalde, because, again, as a former military guy, Army for 10 years, you're looking at something like that going, why are you not running towards the sound of the guns?
My problem with that was it was a law enforcement officer that took care of the situation. He wasn't even on the payroll for that. He was an off-duty
Immigration.
Immigration
Border
officer.
Patrol,
Border
yeah.
Patrol. That's what I was trying to.
Yeah. Thank you, Kev.
Money shouldn't be an issue there. I mean,
Right.
kids. That's the
Yeah.
most. That's the most.
Yeah. And that's not
what's
taken
the
essential.
word?
Yeah.
Essential.
Essential,
The most fragile parts of our society.
Yeah.
We have to look after our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the key thing is, remember that, and I just don't want to leave gaps in this. I don't want people to write us and be like, well, you forgot this or whatever. Border Patrol tried to go in,
Right.
and they were told to stand down,
Right.
And they eventually went in without permission.
Right.
I mean, that's what ended this.
Yeah.
And I will disagree with Paul a little bit in the sense that you talked about the military does it for far less, but they don't, because their food is provided, their housing is provided, their BAQ, their medical, all that stuff is provided. A lot of these officers, right, they got to worry about how they're going to pay their house payment.
That's fair.
You're in the military, you don't really have to worry about that as much because you've got extra funds from BAQ or you're living on base or whatever. And I don't want to get lost in the
Sure.
weeds of what that is. But
no, but it's still, that's a fair counter argument.
yeah, I think, and we're going to talk about this here because this is what started the conversation for you and I this week, Paul, as we were setting up tonight's show. One of the Minneapolis officers involved in the
Yep.
George Floyd death was sentenced this week to 2.5 years in federal prison because of his role in the killing of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what he was sentenced for was not a direct involvement in Floyd's death. It was basically indifference.
Correct.
It was basically not doing anything. And the conversation you and I started with, Paul, was that fair? Is that reasonable? Is 2.5 years? Did he earn that type of a sentence?
2.5 years for indifference, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's how it reads to me. Look, I'm a firm believer that indifference is the greatest sin of this century. And it was the last century as well. People just not caring enough. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was you, Kevin, that pointed out how hard would it have been for that officer to say, hey, dude, let him breathe. Get off of him for a minute. I'm right here. I got him. Whatever you felt the situation was, that would have taken very little effort.
Yeah.
Tom?
So you've got a group of 4 officers responding to a call, an incident. All 4 of those officers are responsible for what happens at that scene.
Agreed.
So the indifference of that guy's turning blue. Yeah, someone should have done something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the right answer is beyond that. I mean, that's the opinion of one knucklehead who probably drinks too much whiskey, but
only because you make it, Tom.
And I think some people will say, well, there's peer pressure in that, right? Do you want to give that cop who's on his back? You're not trying to establish turf or get into it, but it doesn't have to be like that. It could have very easily been
let's
get him up.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
If Chauvin, the officer who had his knee on Floyd's back that resulted in his death, if Chauvin had said no, then you've got, you at least made an effort.
Yeah.
Right?
But now you have friction in the workplace too.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, but I don't think it would have caused any friction. Right. I mean, let's take the studio, for example, far different situation. I'm not comparing the two, but if I'm messing up, Paul can either jump on me and say, darn it, Kevin, you're messing up. Or he can say, hey, let's get back on track. And it's not abrasive. It's just,
right.
It's just personal, interpersonal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any of those officers could have said to Chauvin, hey, let's get him up. Hey, let's sit him up.
Yeah.
Hey, dude's not looking good. Let's
and
get
all
him
3
up.
of them are facing, actually all 4 of them, 3 now, right? They're all facing charges.
Yeah.
For violating George Floyd's civil rights.
Yeah.
And as they should be. It is so important that we hold, and this is my take on this kind of overall about this issue. It is so important that we hold police to the same exact standard we hold the rest of ourselves. If I break a law and an officer of the law breaks the same law, he needs to face the same punishment. I am not a firm believer in qualified immunity. However, I do not believe we just strip qualified immunity and don't replace it with something, because police are in different situations. They do need to have slightly different capabilities to be able to render aid in a situation.
Yes.
So we can't just say, well, that cop took that guy down pretty hard, now charge the cop with assault. No, he was, but there's a conversation that has to be had there, right? Because part of the issue that people have had with police and why people and society as a whole has come down really hard on law enforcement the last years is because they're seeing far too many situations where somebody dies at the hands of police as a direct result of police involvement, one way or another. I'm not talking guilty or innocent. I'm just saying too many people have died at the hands of police officers with zero accountability in the eyes of the public.
Yes.
Right. I'm not going to say that an officer takes a life and there's zero accountability, right? For most decent people, if you're a cop and you take a life, that's with you for the rest of yours.
It should be.
So,
and if it's not, you shouldn't be in that job.
Correct. Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, if we look at the national trend, right? Look at the national trend. It's not like we're talking about this George Floyd case in a vacuum. George Floyd was not the only scenario where we saw this play out, right or wrong. And I think it's fair to look at every single Eric Gardner, Breonna Taylor, all of them, right? To look at them individually. And I think part of what we get lost in is this giant cloud. It is, nobody looks at the individual cases anymore. It is, look at all these cases where a cop killed somebody. instead of analyzing each one of them individually to make a decision on whether or not the shooting was valid, whether or not the police reacted responsibly, all of that. I think George Floyd, I think anybody with half a brain can look at the George Floyd death and unequivocally say that was wrong. Unequivocally, because 9.5 minutes, 4 cops, nobody paying attention, nobody caring, nobody advocating. I don't know of anybody that can look at that, watch that video, and not say, oh, there's nothing wrong here. But I think some of these other ones,
I think that is a very fair point.
I think that a lot of the other ones, we lose the nuances, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
You can have a really valid discussion about the Breonna Taylor murder, and I do believe it was a murder, but I can understand the opposite argument in regards to police serving the warrant on the house and some of the conflicting questions and all the other stuff with it. Same thing with Eric Gardner, same thing with Rolando Castile. I can understand the arguments, but there's some of these that are just so glaring. You can't see it.
But that gets back. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
No. So, do you think let's just call it a rash, whatever, this series of high profile shootings where police have been involved? Do you think does that mirror where society is going right now? I mean, we're so divided as a country.
Can I answer that first?
No, go ahead, Kev.
No, I don't think
you don't think so.
No, so here's the deal. I don't believe we are any more divided now than we've ever been. I think if you look back through history, if you look at the election of 1800, if you look at what happened in Vietnam, if you looked about the Civil War, if you look throughout our country, we have always been a divided country that occasionally came together and then divided over issues again. I don't think we're any more divided than we've ever been. I think the difference is a 24-hour news cycle, a 24-hour media, CNN, which is based where? Hotlanta, that continues to feed the narrative that we're divided and we're trying to kill each other and we're never going to come together and we're a broken country. I don't think we're any more broken than we've ever been. In fact, we've probably been more broken than we are today. And I just don't think people can see that, because now there's just so much on the news telling us how broke we are.
The thing is that the news has always been there.
But not like this, though.
True. But the news has it's still always been there. You know what I think the big problem is right now is social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, that adds to it, yeah.
That immediate gratification from anger or whatever.
Well, and the fact that social media, there's no responsibility or anything for actual facts. It's all emotion and opinion and he said, she said, so we're getting fifth-hand information and no one's really digging into the facts.
Yeah. Paul, do you think that this division is new? Do you think this division is indicative of something different, or what do you think?
So I like the point that you brought up, but you're a student of history.
Yes, I am.
Like I am. So we both recognize the divisions that have existed in this country before, and probably always will to some degree. In fact, we clearly we're not as bad as or we're not worse than ever before. We had a civil war. Those were as a direct result of similar divisions. But having said that, there's a vast difference between the divisions now, in my opinion, versus over the last 200 years. And it gets to the point about social media and the internet. Now people can live in that echo chamber. They can talk to people that think like them instantly. They can begin to build organizations and groups who think like they do. So now, whereas over 200 years, you'd have people spread out all over thousands of square miles, now with the ability to be online, they can take all those people that live thousands of miles away, expressing their anger to each other, and they just sat at home, and ate Sunday dinner and went to church. Now they're getting together in chat rooms. Now that anger can come out in different ways. They can organize, they can plan, they can scheme, they can do other things.
So does that not deepen the divide?
I believe that it makes the divide more dangerous, because I think that it can now be fed with extremism.
Yeah.
And it's a fool's blade can be sharper than his wit.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
And as a result of that, we've already seen people get arrested for threatening Supreme Court justices and stuff like that. I just feel like the world that we live in today, because of our levels of communication and technology, allows for the fringe elements of our society to garner more support,
Mhm.
more listeners,
Mhm.
to rally like-minded people to their cause, and if so desired, take action.
I think it is very important, though, in my book, and as a member of the media, I say this, but the media has a strong amount of culpability in this, because
I wholeheartedly agree.
I think I think social media contributes to it, because it really is the old west, right? I mean, it is tombstone of information, where there's no regulation, there's
Right.
no law, there's no nothing. It's just this just vile emotional conversation about anything and everything with no regulation. And I'm not suggesting we need regulation. I'm just suggesting that's what the internet's turned into be. But I really believe the media, whether that be CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, some of these online media outlets, are just stirring the pot.
See, I think they've followed suit. They've gone just as rogue as John Q. Smith's